You're watching NewsX, I'm Rishabh Gulati. Ladies and gentlemen, every year, tens of thousands of people from across the world pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees to go to premier institutions and Ivy League places. To do what? To learn leadership. You go to schools of policy and government, you go to schools of where you do masters of business administration, is to learn leadership. Leadership is important. There was no way 40,000 British could have ruled a country of 300 million people. But you needed leadership for the 300 million people to understand that. So leadership matters. It can make companies, it can make institutions, it can make nations, it can also destroy them. Think of Nazi Germany. The very German word Führer, in fact, means leader in German. And that didn't end well. So in a position, in a world where we accept that leadership is important, you're seeing in a country where its leadership is destroying it. Let's put some recent developments onto your screens. As we speak, Justin Trudeau, who's been now one of the few Western leaders who's not reached Jerusalem, he's not reached Israel to meet with Netanyahu. He instead decided that he's going to go to a mosque to show solidarity with Muslims, which is fine. But the Muslims are booing him, cussing him, saying that we don't want to hear you, get off the stage. Why don't you just listen in? I think this speaks for itself. Let's listen to this, then I'll come back to the larger premise. Listen to this.
We have the Prime Minister here. We have ministers of the Crown here. We have MPs here. We ask all of you. We ask all of you to listen to him. And if you want, please engage in dialogue.
How many more Palestinian children need to be slaughtered? How many more before you call for a ceasefire?
Boo! Boo!
6,500 under the rubble, 2,000 children. Shame on you. This man won't even call for a ceasefire to stop the slaughter of Palestinian women, children, and men. Shame.
So what you're seeing on your screens is a failure of leadership. Justin Trudeau can't figure out what is right, what is wrong, what is good versus evil. He can't stand with Israel. He's getting booed by the Muslim constituents of Canada. They're saying, shame, shame, take your people, get out of here. In just the past few days, we now know that Canadian intelligence was in constant contact with an AK-47 carrying Niger. We knew during the time of his father, Trudeau's father, that Canadian intelligence was constantly tracking as bombing runs were happening when a terrorist attack on the Kanishka bombings take place. There is now a story that's been done in the Canadian press, published this morning, showing how Canada's government was actively aiding and assisting the PLA of China in hunting down Chinese dissidents in Canada. We have run a story on our sister publication, The Sunday Guardian, which is recreated from a Canadian publication, showing how the PLA of China was running, perhaps is running, not only the police stations, but military training camps, which was caught on camera during one of their drills on Canadian sovereign territory. We know all these things. So leadership matters. And in this leadership, Justin Trudeau, whose party stands accused, and he's not denied it, of taking money from the Chinese. He hasn't denied it. He simply come and said, we've put in various systems to prevent this from happening. He hasn't said it didn't happen. When a country reaches a stage where its highest legislative body, its parliament, its house, can't do a Google search, can't tell the difference between a participatory individual in the Jewish Holocaust and gives them a standing ovation, and then that country is talking about Five Eyes intelligence and having credible evidence. You don't need credible evidence. That was a Google search you could have done. When you reach this kind of crisis, it's a crisis of leadership. Let's open up this conversation. Patikrit is joining us on the broadcast to put some perspective into what's happening. Patikrit was, of course, the day sitting with me when Justin Trudeau began his slippery slope with India. Let me take the opportunity of also introducing Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor and Sumit Peer, all on the broadcast with us. Ambassador Kapoor, let's take the immediate cases in point first. So the immediate case in point is the Canadian press has just said that the Trudeau establishment and the Canadian state has been actively helping the Chinese in hunting down dissidents in Canada. What do you make of this, sir?
Well, thank you, Rishabh, for having me on this show, and thank you for having this discussion, and appreciate all the work that you're doing with your team. To me, when I sit back and reflect upon it, it seems absolutely shocking that a Western democracy, a country which is touted as one of the more liberal democracies of the world, has stooped to this level. And you have framed the issue very well, that it is a crisis of leadership. To see a country like Canada, which we all looked up to, 20 years back, 30 years back, not realizing the flaws in the system there, today behaving almost like a colony of China. Because when you have police stations manned by Chinese police officers and law enforcement officers operating freely, conducting interrogations of Canadian citizens and Chinese refugees who are primarily economic refugees without any due process of law, operating like gangsters, threatening their family members in China, and then abducting and carrying away, not extraditing officially as per the legal channels, through the legal channels, but just picking them up, putting them on a flight to China, and then you really don't know what's happened after that, particularly in the case which has come out recently about the Chinese lady who had made a statement saying that she had given the statement to the Chinese in Shanghai, to the Chinese police under duress, and when she spoke to the lawyer, the Canadian or US lawyer in Shanghai, she said that if this gets out to the Chinese police, I am dead. And then after that, we see that the RCMP officer posted in the Canadian consulate in Shanghai is interrogating the same lady. And then he calls in the Chinese police officer. And the attorney says that after that, he doesn't know what happened to the lady, and he tried to contact her for many years, and most likely she is dead. So if that is a sort of lawlessness which is prevailing on the one hand, where you are supporting China, and why are you supporting China? You are claiming within your system that in lieu of this, we are getting support on fentanyl. Now, do you have to do illegal things to get support on legal matters, control on fentanyl drugs which are killing people in large numbers in North America. In US, it's one of the biggest killers today. All the illegal drugs mainly being exported by China and other countries into US, where you lace normal organic, the drug, plant-based drugs with this chemical drug. And the moment you have a slight overdose, you get into a coma, you get into sort of a critical stage of death, or it's very difficult for you to recover. Now, to stop the imports or exports from China to Canada, they are saying we need cooperation on these aspects. Now, can't Canada say that that is a very legal demand by us, that we do not want, we want your support to stop the import of these drugs into Canada?
All right. I just find it a bit strange. Let me get Patikrit, if you'll allow me, Ambassador, into this conversation. Patikrit, now on our screens right now is a photograph of Nijar, okay, holding an AK-47. His son has just confirmed that Canada's intelligence was in regular contact with the family and regularly speaking with Nijar all the time. So here's a photograph of a man holding an AK-47. Can I put another photograph? Can you put a touchpad on our screens? This, ladies and gentlemen, is Karima Baloch. She was a Balochi activist who had spoken out against the Pakistani state, went to Canada, was found dead in Toronto. And the Canadian police could found, even though the immigration minister said this is deeply suspicious, found no criminal action, nothing wrong in what was obviously an assassination of an activist. So they're deeply concerned about a person holding an AK-47, not concerned at all, couldn't give two hoots that a Muslim woman was probably assassinated in Canada. Patikrit, I was mentioning leadership matters. Something has gone wrong.
Rishabh, thank you. See, first of all, I believe that the basic premise of any country is to protect its own sovereignty, protect their own people and respect the sovereignty of other countries. Now, when you have a country whose leader would pay homage to victims of 9/11, but would forget to give justice to the people of his own country who were killed in the Kanishka bombing of 1985, when you have a leader of a country which sends soldiers to Afghanistan to fight America's war on terror, but fails to give justice to his own people, then that country is not a sovereign country anymore. And there is a fundamental problem invariably with the leadership, because the sovereignty is controlled by somebody else. And in that case, your liberal activism is actually a selective objective with something which serves not the purpose of the country, but the purpose of the leader. And that's why you see a Justin Trudeau-like element has come out, where his leader of the opposition says that he has become a laughing stock. You must see, we have all observed that when Indian government says anything, they're not saying against the country called Canada, but the leadership. And they're saying as and when things become better, we will do the needful. Here is a country whose leadership is openly colluding with the same people who owe allegiance to the same ideology, or the same kind of people who were responsible for the 1985 Kanishka bombing, in which more than 300 or more than 250 Canadians died. Now, in that country, whether he shows solidarity with Ukraine or Russia or Israel or Palestine, people are confused, because Justin Trudeau himself is confused. I think he has sold his morality for the highest bidder. Unfortunately, Canada is actually, Rishabh, if I may get 30 more seconds, has become a harbinger of what is going to be the case of leadership of most of the G7 countries. Okay. I'm very sure that eventually many countries who were fighting against Russia and supporting Ukraine might plead with Russia, don't side with Iran if things become very volatile in Middle East. So they don't know if tomorrow something starts in Taiwan side, South China Sea, which side they would be. So I think the whole of G7, and invariably Justin Trudeau first, must set its goals right. If you cannot protect your own people and your own sovereignty, then there's a fundamental problem. You are not a sovereign country anymore. G7 must introspect.
Okay, no, it's more than introspection. So let's put my pad on the screen once again. Here's an article in the Daily Mail. Okay, Justin Trudeau invited China's People Liberation Army to train troops in Canada. Okay. Here's one written by Tariq Fateh, and may he rest in peace. China's troops trained in Canada against which country? And he's pointing out, and let me read this out. Justin Trudeau invited China's People Liberation Army to send its troops for cold weather training at CFB Petawawa in Ontario. And when Canadian Armed Forces cancelled the training following China's kidnapping of Canadian citizens Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, we were told that the Prime Minister, quote unquote, raged at them for doing so. Now, why would the Chinese be seeking cold weather training in Ontario? Where do they fight cold weather warfare? Where is that? Sumit, can you hazard a guess?
Rishabh, thank you for having me on your show, and happy Ashtami to all, and including yourself. Well, Rishabh, there's no guess. It is Ladakh. It is Ladakh. It is against India, because that is where they are going to fight high altitude warfare, where their forces are not acclimatized. So this man is not only harboring terror against India, he is also training the adversaries of India to fight India in their advantage. What I used to say, Canada is the Pakistan of China. Now, after this revelation, it is really proved. China is the Pakistan of the West. It is really proved. Now, Canada is the Pakistan of the West, because he's doing everything what Pakistan does. Pakistan harbors terrorists, he harbors terrorists. Pakistan fights for terrorists, he fights for terrorists. Pakistan will train anybody and everybody who's an Indian adversary is exactly doing the same. And let me tell you, sir, ISI is acting at will in Canada. There is nothing he can do to even this Karima Baloch. When her body was sent to Pakistan, it was whisked away by ISI. It was not given to her parents. She was buried somewhere in an unknown grave. So that is what this Karima Baloch is about. So this man is facilitating such people. Today, the real estate in real estate in Canada is controlled by Chinese. ISI can operate at will. Khalistanis have infiltrated your government, and your prime minister is Alice in Wonderland. He goes to a mosque, and there the germs of immigration which he immigrated into Canada, which are going to build Canada the greatest nation in the world, they are saying him, how many Palestinians will get killed? Shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. These are the people whom he is giving benefits. These are the people whom he is giving all the things. These are the people who will come and build Canada a great republic. I mean, if you have a prince of misplaced priorities, I think if you do election across the whole world, he will be uncontested number one. Because we have not seen a person who is just simply a dynast, has chocolatey looks, is his papa's boy, failed in modeling, failed in acting, failed in film producing. And the irony of the times is he is your prime minister. And he is going to run the country, he's going to run the diplomatic relations. And he's a G7 leader because his color is white, he is fair, he has brown hair, green eyes. That is the only qualification. This is how, Rishabh, political dynasts are the biggest threat to democracies. This is what a political dynast can do. And this is exactly what Justin Trudeau has done.
So leadership matters. It's very scary. So let me just read what the leader of the opposition in Canada just said. I'm just quoting from him. India is the largest democracy on earth, and it's fine to have our disagreements and to hold each other accountable, but we have to have a professional relationship. President Biden is walking all over Trudeau and treating him like a doormat and slapping him around like a rag doll. I strongly condemn all of the attacks on Hindu mandirs, the threats against Hindu leaders, the aggression shown to Indian diplomats at public events are totally unacceptable. I will continue to oppose it. So you can literally put up a hoarding in which you can put the photograph of India's ambassador to Canada and demand his murder. And that's not a problem. That's not violative of any convention. That's perfectly legitimate. But if you are asked to pare down your diplomatic staff here in India and you're given 1 month notice, that is in violation of all conventions. We need to call up the King of Jordan. So we are calling up the King of Jordan. Gaza is erupting. Okay. 5,000 rockets have been fired. When we talk of the West Bank, do you know what the East Bank is? The East Bank is Jordan. Okay. You're calling up the King of Jordan to discuss India. You lost the plot somewhere. Ambassador Kapoor, and I think the leader of the opposition sums it up. Yeah, we're going to have problems, and there are things we'll agree with, we'll accuse each other of. But there's a point of time when we lose the plot across the board, and a plot has been lost here, and it's going to damage Canada. We are the world's largest democracy. We have not imposed any emergency. When we had protests here in India, and we can think that they had a lot of foreign intervention involved, we dealt with them ourselves. So, where is Justin Trudeau leading modern day Canada, sir?
Most surprising in all of this is for a Western country to violate so many diplomatic norms and, to cross so many red lines and not be held accountable by the international community. The other day I was, listening to the statements made by Melanie Joly on the going away of these 41 Canadian diplomats from India. Now, having been a diplomat for so many decades, I know what the Vienna Convention says, what are the diplomatic protocols, what are the rules in this regard. So for me to hear a foreign minister of a Western country, literally speaking untruths and saying that a country does not have the sovereign right to decide about diplomatic parity and such issues, and they're violating the Vienna Convention. It was such a laughing matter that a foreign minister could stand on a stage and say those things. And when the journalist asked her about the evidence which had been presented to India, again she was fumbling and stuttering, and she could not give a straight, honest answer. So, for Canada to harbor Canadian, citizens who are terrorists on its soil, who are self-proclaimed terrorists also, who have said that they have bombed the Air India plane. And this is incidentally the biggest attack by terrorists in the world before 9/11 happened. The number of people who were killed were more than 300 people, 329, of which 279 were Canadian citizens. Now you are allowing the perpetrators, the terrorists who are Canadian citizens, to roam around scot-free in Canada. So for you to, cross so many diplomatic norms and legal red lines, and then, say these things, and not, on the other hand, when India makes legitimate demands on extradition of terrorists with a lot of evidence, they do not support and execute those requests. And on the other hand, you go to the other extreme with China. So, in so many ways, it is not only becoming like a Pakistan of the Western world, it is also becoming like a colony of China.
Yeah.
Where they are, allowing a free run to these Chinese police officers in their own soil against people without following any due procedure of law.
Yeah, so, and I wish them all the best. You please create around Brampton and Surrey, please create Khalistan. We wish you the best. Please create Chinese military camps all over Quebec, because we know the PLA has already been there. Videos of them released by the Canadians themselves in the Canadian press, which we've also published, of the PLA training its people there. And that's not legitimate. That's not a military training invited over. That's God knows how they got there and what they were doing.
What needs to be condemned in very, very strong language, and Canada has to be taken to task in the United Nations and in all, forums, is what you mentioned, Rishabh, about these Indian diplomats. The images of them being put on wanted lists in public places, and the display of the assassination of a Prime Minister in public places with blood, with firing, etc., with simulated sounds, etc.
Okay.
Now, for that sort of thing to happen, where diplomats of a country who are, supposed to be protected as per Vienna Conventions, for them to be exposed in this manner, I think it is absolutely crossing all the lines. I'm just going to
draw a highlight to something on our screens. Can I get my touchpad back in? Because that's the reflecting on our screens. You can find this at sundayguardianlive.com. This is written by, let me just zoom in, Scott McGregor, Ina Mitchell and Bob Mackin, okay? Reporting from Vancouver, British Columbia and Canada. And this is the story of Bo Fan, a 41-year-old who had worked here since arriving from China in February 2019, hosting swanky parties to impress recruits for the Create Abundance International, a mysterious multi-level marketing operation considered a cult by Chinese authorities. And have a look at this. Ferraris, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Lamborghinis. This is a photograph taken at her house when her brother and sister-in-law finally took her to the Peace Arch Hospital because she was shot. Okay. They could not save her. Among her injuries, a femur broken in half, the strongest bone in the body. She could have been another statistic if not for a YouTube video posted 2 years earlier by a guy on Salt Spring Island, a local legend fond of tropical plants. Clemente was driving on the North Beach Road when he came across more than 50 people in camouflage gear marching on the roadside. It looked like the soldiers were headed to Salt Spring Mineral Spring Resort, a property owned by Create Abundance International Institute. He posted this short clip on YouTube and then forgot about it. Little did he know that it would catch the eye of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Canadian Security Intelligence, the SIS, but they thought it was just a cult. So the Chinese, and here's a screenshot from Richmond in British Columbia, of people in fatigues doing military training. This is Di Lin, a Chinese spy. Here is Damon Law. Here is Emily Chong, Bo Fan, who was killed. What were all these people doing? What were they up to? Here is the same person holding, I don't know if that's an M16 or it's a Chinese rifle. Gongbo Li, Justin Fan, Xinyu Zhang, Zhongju. What were these people doing? And here is the same Gongbo Li, and who's he standing with? Justin Trudeau. Pathikrit. So now there's a plot loss. Should it matter to us anymore? Should we care? It's up to the Canadians, up to Trudeau. Go fish.
So eventually, Rishabh, we should, and I'm sure the government of India is very careful about all these things. That's why certain actions are being taken. Let me tell you, from what I understand is that many of the Canadian diplomats who have been told to go have been involved in all kinds of nefarious activities within India. They were accused of identifying targets for the Khalistanis so that they can come and shoot them. There have been many killings as such, and today Mr. Jaishankar also mentioned that over a period of time, people will come to know the reason why the ouster actually happened from India of the Canadian diplomats. I'll tell you one thing, Rishabh, I find it very strange that none of the Five Eyes countries are giving any good piece of advice to Trudeau and his government, or are they waiting for him to just leave the office in due course of time? Because if the Chinese put up a base in Canada eventually, who would be their actual target? And not just India, it will be United States. Are the Americans not aware of it, and still they keep on pampering this guy somewhere or the other way, saying that no, Canada should be heard? That's why I say there is a fundamental problem with G7 and the leadership, and the presumption and the perception by the Western media they created all the time that whatever the G7 does or the West does, it must be the right thing, and what they say for the rest is the best thing to do. So this is where the problem is. Are the Canadians, are the Americans not realizing what Justin Trudeau is doing? Forget about India. India is far away. But the next door big brother of Canada, which has always pampered Canada, are they not realizing the kind of threat Trudeau is becoming to the American internal security? Because the Canadians, if they come and set up a bastion in Canada, if the Chinese come up and set up a bastion in Canada, they're not going to stay there forever. That Canada is not their ultimate objective. Is eventually their goal is United States and whatever they want to do with them. So fundamentally, it is. I think Canadian leadership today is a microcosm of the deep hollowness of the leadership of the G7, and you see exactly that is being reflected by Trudeau's approach towards the Middle East crisis. He doesn't know which side he should go. Whether he would try to pamper his vote bank back home in Canada of the immigrants, or he should side with Israel. So somewhere he ends up being nothing, and that's exactly what is going to happen time and again, because they did the same thing in Ukraine. They might do the same thing in case of Taiwan if it happens. So I think India did the best thing to distance Canada from itself for the time being, because
fine.
what extent they're unpredictable.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm also fatigued, and after a point, it's simply not worth our time anymore. And that's the biggest insult. It's simply not worth our time anymore. Can't figure out your own country, you impose an emergency on your own country, you beat up your own people, you're in bed with the Chinese, you're training them maybe in warfare against India. Sumit Peer, so that's my question to you. Should we just tell Justin Trudeau to go fish and move on with life? He can do what he wants, where he wants, get booed, get chanted on, that's his problem now.
I think, Rishabh, he is what we call in the language of insurance total loss. But you can't be repaired. He's already a total loss as a leader. So the more we associate with him, the more we give him weightage, he gets the international TRP for nothing. You know, in his own country, he is booed. In his own people whom he has got into Canada saying shame to you, they are telling him why the Prime Minister of Canada is not siding with the terrorists. Look, in his own country, the people he immigrated to Canada to build a Canada are telling you, look, Mr. Prime Minister, you are not supporting terrorists, shame on you. Palestinians are getting killed, shame on you. You know, for not supporting Hamas, he is getting booed. And I incidentally don't understand how many plumbers in Canada carry a AK-47. There is a mysterious plumber who is carrying a AK-47, was carrying a AK-47. He ends up in a no-fly list. And for that, the Canadian Prime Minister wants to, let the hell break loose and, sacrifice all the interests of Canada for an AK-47 carrying plumber on a no-fly list. Is this a normal in Canada? Is this what
it's become normal.
Where does he go? So do all the plumbers carry AK-47? I don't know recently. I have not been there recently.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
Like
maybe you need to get on some app and call a plumber and ask him if he has an AK-47.
Yeah,
the answer.
M16 bhi chalega. M16 will also do.
Okay, so rather strange. So I'm going to recommend you read this article which has been published in the Canadian press. The article is here. Can we put this on our screens, please? Can you put my touchpad? I'll just leave the reference here. This is the CBC, how Canada has been helping China hunt for fugitives for decades. Here's the article that was published in the Sunday Guardian by Canadian journalists, investigative journalists who performed the investigation. It is an extensive article. How a murder in Canada led to the unraveling of a CCP spy operation. It's worth reading, and I'll leave the rest for people to apply their own minds. Frankly, Justin Trudeau, you're not worth our time anymore. You lost the plot. And you lost the plot so badly that you are out lobbying for terrorists, and then that makes sure that you lost credibility. Look at this. He's a man carrying an AK-47, and him you're really worried about. Karima Baloch, you were not worried about. Chinese PLA training in Canada, you're not worried about. You're helping them, probably training them yourself. You're being booed by Muslims in your own constituency. You can't take a stand from Israel. You haven't been able to show up in Jerusalem. You're neither here nor there. You're everywhere and nowhere. Good night.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.